Warning. Federal law provides severe civil and criminal penalties for the unauthorized redistribution of bad tier lists, matchup charts, or alignment graphs. Criminal tier lists are investigated by the FBI and may constitute a felony with a maximum penalty of up to 5 years in prison and or a $250,000 fine.
Oh, what is good, guys? New Guilty Gear Strive.
What's good, YouTube? Street Fighter 5 tier list.
Hello everyone and welcome to a new video. Street Fighter 5 tier list.
What's going on, everybody? Yes, it's that time of year and the absolute final tier list that I will make.
What's up, guys? So, fighting game tier list.
We've all seen the videos about tier lists. They've pretty much become an epidemic on the FGC and content creation within it. And why wouldn't they be? They're easy to make, fun to talk about, and offer insights into the minds of top players. But the problem with them is that they don't matter. Like, at all. This is because the rules of the game are different for pro players. If diamond players make up about the top 4% of players and master rank and above is 0.004, then pro players would make up about 0.001% of players. That means the rules they are abiding by and the game that they're playing is nowhere near the same game as you, dear viewer. And that's just to say their tier lists are not really something us as regular players should be going off of. But that got me thinking. Accounting for the entire player base and using that data, what would actually be the strongest character in Street Fighter 5? What would that tier list look like? Only one way to find out.
Allow me a moment to entertain you.
Before we get started, I'm going to set some ground rules for how this is going to work. I'm going to look at 3 separate sources of info for our data. The first is Capcom's CFN website, which contains data from every ranked match in Street Fighter 5. Sets, Capcom's Fight Card series, which features long sets between players from around the world, and Capcom Cup, the World Tour Finals in Street Fighter 5. These 3 sources will give us certain points of data on each character, and at the end of all 3 sections we'll add up the point totals for every character and create a tier list based on the totals, which should tell us the objective rankings for every character in the game. Let's get started. To top things off, we'll look at ranked matches. Ranked matches are where the general player base gets their representation, so this part will have the highest weight on point totals. Luckily, Capcom's fighting stats can tell us a ton about what happens on rank. For example, they track the general win rate of every character in the game, as well as their win rate against other certain characters. And this is then split up into 4 categories by rank brackets. So for our experiment, to figure out every character's value, we'll have to average out their win percentages against each rank. Here's an example. E Honda has the highest win rate in Rookie to Ultra Silver with a value of 5.46. Since 76% of ranked players are in this bracket, we'll multiply this average by 1.76 to give it more weight over the smaller brackets. This brings Honda's adjusted score to 6.58. That's a pretty solid score considering Honda's one of the worst characters in the game. Honda actually breaks the top 10 of character win rates in 3 out of the 4 categories, including Grandmaster Award. Pretty impressive. And before anyone says it, I know this metric isn't accounting for how much these characters are actually used in rank, but really, it's hard to figure out what effect that actually has on the effectiveness of a character anyway. So after averaging the totals of all character win rates in ranked matches, we're left with something that looks like this. I think it's pretty crazy to think that characters like Fong and Blanca might be 2 of the best ranked characters in the game, taking the number 3 and 4 spots respectively. But characters like Falk and Ed being there makes sense. They're easy to learn, they've had fantastic results in high-level competition, and Ed at least is one of the most popular characters in the game. So, with ranked out of the way, we're already seeing that if tier lists were made for the entire player base, they'd look drastically different. Certain top tiers would be made, and certain low tiers would have a seat at the top. But now we're going to move into the higher level territory and see how it affects this list. Sets is the next destination on our journey. Sets is a fantastic source of data for this experiment because it's actually the closest thing to the root of what we're talking about. Tier lists used to be made very similar to what we see on CFN. The assumption was that if 2 players of equal skill matched up against each other 10 times, whatever the score was basically defined the matchup. So, using CFN as an example, if a Warlord Honda were to face a Warlord Fong, the Honda would only win 3.2 out of 10 matches. This is what we call a 7-3 matchup, meaning it's very much in Fong's favor. Basically, if your character has more good matchups than bad, they're probably a solid character, and that's how tier lists used to be made. So, back to sets. It's literally a show about first to tens, which means we can use it to get valuable data on how these characters do against each other in long sets. I think Damascus puts it pretty well talking about why long sets are important.
It just shows, guys, right, that sometimes you watch tournament games and they're 3-0 and you're like, God damn, that was 3. And look at what happens when it's first to 7.
That is so different. Longevity, the consistency, the mental that you have to play the same person that times back to back. This is game 10. No fatigue's getting in. The whole I know mind games. They have to draw for like plans M's and O's.
Since sets features high-level players, usually those around Grandmaster and up, these points will be weighted just a bit less than ranked, and here's how. I went and tallied the usage in games won for every character featured in sets. There's about 80 episodes, and after taking the numbers from each set, I've come up with this distribution. This graph does a great job of telling us a character's popularity, as well as how effective they are at the same time. Some characters get picked by high-level players a lot because they're strong, others don't get picked as often because they're weak, and some players just pick the character they're passionate about. The character that showed up the most times in sets was Seth. They appeared on 8 different episodes and ended up with a point total of 48, which is pretty middle of the pack considering how many matches they actually got. The biggest takeaway from all this is how dominant Cody was. He's tied for second most usage at 7 and has a total of 67 points, which is by far the most in the entire cast. Interestingly though, every character in the roster has also appeared in sets, except one, Gil. Well, technically he did appear, but he didn't win a single game and was also switched for Alex, so I have a hard time counting him since he actually won't get any points. Gotta say good job to the sets team for showing such a variety. Fong appeared as the worst character, by far, not even close. He was used twice, once by Mortzy and once by Vegapatch. In the first case, Mortzy lost 10-0 to Chris CCH. The lesson here would be to think that Fong at high level is pretty much a lost cause, but let's save that for later. Now to add these to the tier total, I'll divide everyone's values by 10 and add that to the amount of points they had from rank. With that done, the new list looks like this. The biggest changes made are that the top tiers pros are always talking about start to show their faces a bit more where we'd expect them to be. Cody and Balrog are absolutely untouchable with their long sets points added, and the majority of the top 10 seems pretty much the same except Blanca and Fang got demoted hard. Vega persisting as top 10 is extremely unexpected, but he had solid showings in sets, which helped him bolster his place as one of the best in the game. Characters that many see as top tier like Poison, Zeku, and Rashid haven't begun to make their way to the top yet, so I have to see what kind of impact top level play will have on them. What's crazy about Luke though, is that he's slowly creeping his way towards the top, and he wasn't even introduced into the game until Sets was already 30 episodes in. Meaning, he had just over half the chances to gain points as everyone else, and is still sitting pretty. Although I'm sure most of you can guess how this is going to end.
That was beautiful. He knew, guys. He knew Problem X was on the verge of elimination, really stressed out. Mr. Crimson in and out. That style perfect.
But now we've reached the final source of data to help us find the actual best character in Street Fighter V, definitive, Capcom Cup. To say I was looking for representative data for the highest level of gameplay and not use Capcom Cup somehow would be disingenuous at best. So here's how we'll incorporate it. Capcom Cup featured 47 players from around the world who played in a group stage to qualify for top 16. If a character made it into the group stage, they'd be awarded 0.05 points. If they made top 16, 0.10, and top 8 would guarantee 0.15 points per player. Since this is pretty much 0.001% of players, we don't want this to garner too many points in the tier list. So, let's get started. The group stage of Capcom Cup was incredibly diverse, featuring 30 out of the 45 characters on the roster, which really shows how balanced the game actually is. The characters who showed up the most were Ken, who showed up 5 times, and Cody, Balrog, Seth, and Birdie, who showed up 4 times. It's not really a surprise, but Luke was chosen by a total of 12 players. We all know Luke is very strong, so I won't dwell on it, but it's actually insane, considering so many picked him, and yet 29 other characters got time on the stage as well. And with that, we move on to top 16. In this part, we got 14 characters, so the diversity stayed intact and persisted. We love to see that. Once again, Luke dominated, appearing 5 times while Cody and Ken showed up twice. That's pretty good, all things considered. Everyone else showed up just once. Last things last, we arrive at top 8, where there were actually only 2 Luke players, Mena RD and NL. Sure, Menno went on to win the tournament with Luke, but the finals weren't as riddled with the character as I thought it would. So with all that said, Luke gained a total of 1.4 points to add to his tier total, which will definitely help his standing. Let's see what that looks like. This list is ordered from top to bottom, and there's a lot to take in. For starters, Zeku being bottom 10 contradicts almost every top player's list harshly. Here, Pump puts Zeku as top 8 in the game. Zeku is spoken about by many to boast really good tools and neutral, while being able to handle a lot of matchups due to him being 2 characters in one. And yet, he wasn't even near the top 10 in the ranked tier list. What's not shown with Zeku is that there's hardly any reason to pick him up in the long run. Plenty of characters get the same job done with less trouble, like Ken or Seth. So many Zeku players have dropped him entirely for this reason. Another point of interest is the group of Vega, Birdie, and Fong. They're all considered mid by most top players, and that's reflected in their tier list. Here's the one made by Idom and Just a Kid. Those 3 sit at the bottom of B tier, but on our list, they're in and just out of top 10. These results at Capcom Cup show they're strong, the results on Setso, Vega, and Burden are strong, and the results on Ranked show they're just as strong as pretty much any other character. Lastly, Luke. There's not much to say about him at this point. Everyone knows he's the best and it's been proven time and time again. But this experiment helps us understand why normal players shouldn't let Luke deter us from loving the game. Sure, he won Capcom Cup and is a menace at the highest level, but to most of us just playing online and locals, he's not much scarier than the rest of the cast. I put this experiment together to show how top player biases can affect our judgment as well as their own. Seeing your main low on the tier list doesn't mean as much as you might think coming from a top player. Their opinions are formed around their experiences, and it's up to us to shape our own. Too many people are fixated on trying to think what they think they're supposed to think, even asking for tier list placements on a character day one.
Learn something about fighting games. You don't go to tier lists.
Anyone who's prepared to give you a tier list thing now probably isn't worth listening to.
Yeah.
Street Fighter 6 is coming in a few months, and people are going to post tier lists within the first week. Hell, we've already got tier lists from the betas. Don't listen to them. Play who you want and have fun. That will push you to improve and get the most out of any fighting game. That's all I have for now. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.